Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 30th of January 2015. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comments. Coming up in the show, Nintendo rolls out its affiliate program for YouTube creators, and EA confirms that Ubisoft's recently revoked fraudulent keys for FarCry 4 were indeed fraudulently obtained from Origin. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Nintendo has perhaps been one of the most aggressive companies when it comes to YouTube, monetization, and content ID claims. Many prominent creators have had problems in the past with Nintendo automatically content ID claiming and taking the ad revenue from their videos, regardless of the context or indeed fair use. Recently, even the biggest reviewer in the world, Angry Joe, had his Nintendo video claimed, which needless to say he was not too happy about. Nintendo has now unveiled an affiliate program which they claim will allow content creators on YouTube to monetize Nintendo content in return for a share of the ad revenue. A significant share of the ad revenue. The affiliate program goes something like this. You can register either single videos or entire channels, the program says. When you register a channel, you'll be eligible to receive a share of ad revenue from Nintendo for all videos included on that channel, regardless of their content. If you only want some videos to apply to the program, please register each individual video instead. You can only use channels or videos that contain copyrighted content related to game titles specified by Nintendo, and they must be original creations. Make sure they don't contain copyright material from third parties or content from unconfirmed game titles. There's a list of games you can use. It can regularly take up to 3 business days for your registered content to be reviewed and finalized. This is potentially a big bugbear. We'll talk about that in a minute. The advertising revenue share, here's the kicker, is 70% for channels and 60% for videos, and this rate may be changed arbitrarily. You must also include a disclaimer in the video, which says that you have a license to use Nintendo's content, along with a few other little pieces of legal mumbo-jumbo, and that has to be disclosed prominently, either verbally or in the video itself. You can't just dump it in the description. Nintendo will pay out via PayPal only in US dollars, which is, again, a further kick in the teeth to quite a lot of people. Okay, so, from the perspective of a YouTuber, this program sucks. It really does. It is a terrible deal for anyone that wishes to take it, and I would strongly urge against it. Here's a few reasons as to why that is. So Nintendo is the only, and I do mean the only company currently trying to pull this sort of stuff. We've seen some companies issue content ID claims in the past, but none have been as persistent with it as Nintendo. And Nintendo's insistence that they are now entitled to a large portion of advertising revenue is questionable at best, and I feel is thoroughly regressive when it comes to online media content. So let's talk about the ad revenue share first. Why is this a bad number? So they're taking 40% for videos, but if you register an entire channel, basically you sacrifice to the Lord Nintendo and say, all right, I'm committed to you as a company, they'll take only 30%. I mean, that sounds totally reasonable, right? You know, they're not taking the majority. Yeah, see, here's the problem. This is after all the other revenue sharing you've got to get done. So first things first, about 50 to 55%-ish of your revenue from all ads is immediately taken by Google. That's for every YouTube partner. Can't avoid it. So that's half your money gone immediately. Then you're probably part of a MCN, a multi-channel network. An MCN is going to take, on average, anywhere between 10 to 40% of your revenue right off the bat after the Google share. Rev share agreements do vary from company to company, so we're going to take an average of about 30%, which is, from what I understand, around standard at the moment. It's starting to be phased out a little bit. Some MCNs are going for low rev shares, but they're trying to push brand deals as a better option. So let's just assume 30%. Okay, so now we're down to, let's just say, less money, and I'll give you some figures in a second. After that 30%, Nintendo is then going to take 40% of what is left, or 30% for those that commit fully to being a Nintendo-only channel, which frankly, in my opinion, stifles your growth potential, and tying yourself to one company is a very silly idea. After that, Nintendo is going to send the money via US dollars, meaning that anybody who is not in the US region is going to have to pay currency conversion fees, which is usually, again, about a few cents give or take, and of course it varies depending on exchange rate on a day-to-day basis. Not only that, but since they're sending via PayPal, and I highly doubt that Nintendo is going to pay the fees, you are going to be saddled with the fees, which are usually around 4%. So, how good a deal is this for YouTubers? Well, let's take an example. Let's say your video, fairly small video, makes $100. Immediately, half of that disappears because it goes into Google's pocket, so you're now down to $50. Then the MCN comes in and takes the average of about 30%, which takes $50 down to $35. After that's happened, Nintendo comes in and takes 40%, assuming that you are doing just one video. That is taking it down from $35 to $21. They then send you the money via PayPal, and assuming you're in the US and not having to pay currency conversion fees, you then lose another 4%, which takes you down to $20.16 from the original $100. Not brilliant, is it? I mean, even if you're with an MCN, the deal's not that amazing. As I said before, it takes it down to about $35 out of the $100 that the video would have made previously anyway. But then you're down to $21 after that, if you let Nintendo get the grubby mitts on things. It is not a good deal at all. Now, if I had to make an assumption as to how they're actually going to pull this off, because I imagine they're not going to be working directly with MCNs, is they're going to apply a claim to every single Nintendo video that they see through this program. And that's going to claim all of the ad revenue, at least what they can get after the MCN share and Google share, which I assume they will not be able to touch. If they start touching MCN shares, I think there's going to be a huge pushback from some very, very powerful networks, but we will see. Then I assume what they do is they do the calculation and then they send you the money. So you're not actually getting paid directly for the Nintendo videos through your MCN. You're getting paid through Nintendo themselves via PayPal, which is awkward as hell and annoying for accounting, to say the least. The question is, are they entitled? Can they do it? Yeah, legally they can. There are fair use arguments to be made. My concern, of course, is if they start applying this to review content, then frankly, that is a corporate shakedown. You can't do that. You can't say, oh, you want to review our game? Then we're going to take some money for that. Jesus Christ. I mean, the conflict of interest alone. That's not to mention the obvious idea of potential censorship. If you sign up to this program, you are required to authorize everything through the Nintendo program, which takes 72 hours, according to them. That's assuming it doesn't take even longer than that. So if you do any review content for Nintendo games while signed up to this program, this is assuming that Nintendo goes full crazy and decides to start putting claims down on reviews, which is going to result in a huge backlash if they do, then your review is going to be 72 hours later than everybody else's, which means it's significantly less relevant. I'm hoping they have the common sense not to do this to reviews. Doesn't affect me, I just do PC content because the people on PC happen to be less insane than the people at Nintendo, but I could see this affecting a whole bunch of different channels. I mean, including big reviewers like Angry Joe that just picked up a Wii U, and then the first video they put out gets claimed. So I can't imagine it's going to be having a look at Wii U games anytime soon. This could also affect those that happen to do news programs. I do a news program, Content Patch, of course. If I use Nintendo footage, it's possible that they may attempt to claim the news program as their own, which, of course, is ridiculous. You know, they're not entitled to ad revenue just because I reported on their game. That's ludicrous. But the biggest effect is going to be going out to those that Let's Play Nintendo games, and I feel particularly sorry for people like Chugga Conroy that have shown nothing but loyalty to that company for a very long time and are getting completely screwed as a result of their decision. And I would strongly suggest to those that only do Nintendo, start to think about transitioning, because this is not a company that cares about you. That is obvious. They care about taking money for no real reason. I mean, how much money do they actually expect to make off of this based on their bottom line? I think frankly, it's a pittance. It doesn't affect them at all. It certainly does affect, however, those who are creating content about their games, who frankly simply exist to promote the products that they already have. It is free advertising, there's no doubt about that. And these channels do drive sales. That's been proven in many cases by many developers, and as a result, many developers have adopted a Let's Play friendly policy. Just saying, look, this new form of media is out there, people clearly want to consume it, let it be. Don't mess around with this. The last thing you want to do is drag this thing into court, because if this ends up being ruled the wrong way, then suddenly Let's Play disappears, and the people that get hurt by that are actually the companies that benefit from its existence in the first place. So I think everyone, for the most part, is happy to just kind of let it be and let things tick along as they are. Except Nintendo, who is a constant meddler and has been doing this whole copyright claim thing for years now. This is not a good step from Nintendo at all, and it's not a good step for YouTubers, and I would strongly suggest to YouTubers that are thinking about signing up, don't look at Nintendo games. There are plenty of other titles that you could be playing. Nintendo doesn't release that many games. You don't really have to worry too much about it. Go play something else. something that is not covered by this, by a company that does not believe it is entitled to money from your work. And the counter-argument to be made is that we make money from Nintendo's work. Yeah, you can make that argument. You can make the argument that the work is derivative rather than transformative. That's entirely possible. I've had this argument before. If you want to learn about that, then I've talked about this whole thing many times before. There's a couple of links in the description if you want to know my wider opinion on Let's Play monetization. But it speaks volumes that Nintendo is the only company pulling this off, whereas every other company is putting out statements to say, no, totally, you can use this stuff. Even Microsoft recently clarified, by the way, with their policy that, yes, you actually can call your video Let's Play Halo, which previously their policy wasn't very well written. It seemed to indicate that you couldn't do that. But they've said, yeah, we've changed our minds. They used to have a kind of anti-LP policy. Now they're saying, yes, you can Let's Play and monetize our content. It's fine. Because they realize that this is the way forward. This is how things get shared and marketed. And cracking down on it does not make any sense at all. Yeah, this program is junk, as far as I'm concerned. And I would strongly suggest that you do not get involved in it. Now, you may have heard a little bit about some recent controversy with Ubisoft, Uplay, and Far Cry 4. Ubisoft recently revoked a set of keys for Far Cry 4 after claiming that they had been acquired fraudulently through unauthorized grey market resellers such as G2A and Kinguin. Now, over the last few days, more information has been brought to light on this particular piece of news, including EA actually coming out to bat for Ubisoft and saying that yes, they know that these keys were actually bought fraudulently. They were bought fraudulently through Origin. And it not only included keys for Far Cry 4, but also Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, and The Crew. Speaking to Eurogamer, an EA spokesman claimed a number of activation keys for Ubisoft products were purchased from Origin using fraudulent credit cards and then resold online. We identified the unauthorized keys and notified Ubisoft. If you're having trouble with an activation key, we recommend you contact the vendor who sold it to you for a refund. We strongly advise players only to purchase keys from Origin or trusted resellers. And then they give you a link to their policy on the subject. The two major grey market resellers involved appear to be Kinguin and G2A, and there's been another development on the Kinguin front where they have claimed that Kinguin claims that the unauthorized reseller is an anonymous Russian and that they had received over 4,600 customer tickets during the last 72 hours of players who had apparently had their games disappearing from Uplay demanding refunds. They estimate that this will cost them 148,000 euros in refunds, and it affected 35 out of 3,400 Kinguin merchants. Now, bear in mind that Kinguin, in many ways, acts as kind of an eBay for keys, meaning that these keys can be acquired from essentially anywhere. They could be off the back of a lorry, they could be stolen, they could be acquired through credit card fraud, whether that be a stolen credit card or chargeback scams, and they can be sold without really any verification whatsoever. Kinguin went on to warn its merchants that they must pay bigger attention to who their business partners are and avoid risk transactions with new entities. Now, we talked about this subject in July of last year, if I recall correctly, when Rebellion did a similar thing for keys for Sniper Elite, which it claimed were fraudulently obtained. Now, in this case, with this statement and with the verification from Kinguin, it would appear that you should be siding with Ubisoft and EA, and I know that that might be anathema to some of you, but it seems like they are the ones telling the truth in this particular situation, and that yes, these keys were obtained in very large amounts fraudulently. And that's the risk with using sites like that. G2A, Kinguin, CGS, and various other sites are not authorized Steam resellers, and a lot of the keys they acquire are from various sources, many of which are from cheaper regions. Now, there has been some crackdown on this as of late, and in order to buy certain keys, you actually have to use a VPN now. But in many cases, a lot of these keys are acquired from regions that can't bear the regular cost of a video game. Their average income is a lot lower, and as a result, their piracy rates are very high, because of course people are not just going to stop playing games just because they can't afford them. So as a result, the response from some publishers has been to lower prices in those regions to make them more affordable. Unfortunately, since these keys can be just entered into Steam from pretty much anywhere, what we have are people in richer countries buying keys that were intended for poorer countries, which is not the same as piracy, certainly not. Now, it's not like the publisher isn't making some money, but the publisher isn't making as much money as they probably would have otherwise. As I've stated before, the lost revenue thing is a fallacy because you can't prove that the person in question would have bought the key at full price to begin with. They may have waited for a sale, they may have pirated the game, they may just buy their keys from these places because they will only buy keys at this price or lower. So you can't prove lost revenue because you can't prove intent. Regardless, though, it is a problem, and it's going to become even more so if this kind of thing continues to happen. We're talking about wide-scale credit card fraud, and of course we are also talking about these sites really benefiting from selling keys that were never intended for their particular end user. There's a lot of potential things that could end up happening if this sort of behavior continues. The most obvious would be wider scale region locking, which of course is anti-consumer. You'd never really want that. There's a bunch of reasons why. Maybe you don't really realize it, I suppose, in regular use, but what happens if you go on holiday, for instance, and you don't have a VPN? Suddenly half your games stop working. What happens if you emigrate, for instance? If I emigrated from the UK to the US, which I did, then would I lose all my video games? That doesn't sound like a very good idea. I have thousands of dollars worth of games. That's ridiculous. You end up in a position where you can't gift to friends in other regions. Hell, you end up sometimes in really nasty positions where the multiplayer is region locked. So there's all sorts of problems with playing with friends there. So you don't want region locking on PC. That's not good. But unfortunately, it is an answer to a lot of what's going on, because VPNing can be a pain in the arse and it can also slow things down, not to mention that many of the better VPNs actually cost money to sign up for. So you don't really want to be in a position where you have to VPN, and it's not a particularly common thing. The worst case scenario for these countries that can't regularly afford these games is that they end up in a position where the publisher decides to stop selling at that rate because they're losing too much money from it, and they say, look, we would prefer the higher piracy rate at this point. Like, we don't care. This is getting really, really bad, and a lot of people from Western nations are buying in cheaper than they should be, so we need to stop that. Now, I don't blame consumers for this, and there's various reasons for that. Firstly, it's hard for a consumer to really determine what is a legitimate key reseller and what is a grey market key reseller. There's no real list anywhere. It can be hard to determine what's legit and what is not, especially considering these sites look very legitimate, and more often than not, their keys work as intended. Secondly, these sites are being pushed by a lot of streamers and YouTubers as of late. I've received so many sponsorship offers from both G2A, Kinguin, and actually various other sites that do the same sort of thing. Because they say, hey, yeah, you can get a cut from everything you sell. So you get a kickback from every game that is bought from that service. That is potentially very profitable for more popular streamers. I mean, hell, even PewDiePie, I believe, actually had a deal with G2A. Lots of streamers have deals with G2A and Kinguin. So these sites are being promoted by people who are seen as trustworthy, which generally they are. And it's often being done without any real knowledge of what these companies actually do. There's some responsibility, I think, to be put on streamers and YouTubers, but simultaneously, most of the business that is done on those sites is not going to result in consumers getting screwed over. So it's not like these are massive scam merchants that are being promoted here. Most of what they do is at least reasonably legitimate. You can argue the legitimacy of grey market key reselling, but it's not illegal. So I don't really blame the streamers for this, but you can very well see why it is that so many people believe these sites to be legitimate key resellers, because they're being told that they are. All of that said, there is a degree of the rather outdated notion of caveat emptor here. If a game comes out at $60 and then on the same day G2A is selling it for $35, where do you think that discount's coming from? It's not sudden sorcery. It's not like they can outprice Steam because they're richer than Valve. No, it's nonsense. They beat Steam on price because they're selling a product that was never really intended for that region in the first place. And in some cases, as we've seen, is stolen. And of course, stolen goods do tend to be cheaper. And I really can't sympathize too much with consumers that get their keys revoked and then they complain, because I'm sorry, which country do you live in where you're allowed to keep stolen goods? Could you point me to that country? It's not this one, I can tell you that for a fact. So Ubisoft is entitled to remove those stolen goods, and you're not entitled to keep them. What you are entitled to do is go and complain to the retailer, not Ubisoft. It's the retailer's fault that they sold you dodgy goods. It is not Ubisoft's fault. They had nothing to do with it. And God, woe betide me for siding with Ubisoft on anything, but I stick to the damn facts. Thank you very much. I understand people's desire to buy cheaper keys. You know, $60 games are pricey and they're often something of a risk, especially for Ubisoft, for God's sake. And you could say, look, Ubisoft has encouraged this kind of behavior by releasing a bunch of tat on launch this year. Yeah, they did, and yes, they have. I cannot trust the new Ubisoft game anymore because 2014 has had a run of disastrous AAA launches from their company. So they have themselves increased both piracy and grey market reselling because they can't be trusted to sell you a working game at $60. Bear that in mind. But regardless, please, buyer beware. Remember, if something looks too good to be true, it very well might be. It is generally a lot safer if you can't afford a game at launch price to wait for a sale. Sales happen quicker and quicker and quicker these days, and do try and stick to what you know are authorized resellers. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, I would like to give you a wonderful track from OC Remix as always. I don't usually go in for vocal remixes, honestly. A lot of them, I don't know, they're just not to my taste, I'm going to be honest. But this one in particular is actually pretty damn good, and it's of Portal 2, which is a rarely remixed game. I believe there's only 3 remixes in total, including this one. This one goes by the name of Don't Even Try. It is a remix of the song Exile Vilify, and remixed by Brandon Strader. The original composers were Aaron Desner, Jonathan Colton, of course, Pat Berninger, and Mike Maraski. It's quite a nice little folksy take on the subject with great quality guitar tracks in there as well. So I like it a lot. Hopefully you will as well. And you can find the download in the description below this video. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I will see you next time.
It takes your mind again. Exile. It takes your mind again. You've got sucker's luck. Have you given up? Does it feel like a trial? Does it trouble your mind the way you trouble mine? The way you trouble mine. It takes your mind again. Exile. It takes your mind again. Oh, you meant so much. Have you given up? Does it feel like a trial? Does it trouble your mind the got thumbs